You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today here on the landofisrael.com. And we are broadcasting from here in Jerusalem as the election on April 9th comes closer. And we are continuing our series of meeting the most fascinating candidates that are being chosen in each and every party. And last week I had the good fortune of being able to cover the surprisingly interesting and successful Labor Party primary. People said that the Labor members weren't going to come out to vote, and sure enough they did. They had about the same voter turnout as the Likud, and people said they're going to vote for the same old candidates that they've had before, and sure enough, they picked for a high spot on the list. The eighth most votes went to Yair Yaya Fink, who is a fascinating candidate, and I'm happy that he is here on Inside Israel Today. Yaya, thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay, so please tell us about yourself.
I'm 34 years old. I'm from Jerusalem originally, and I was born and raised in Jerusalem. I learned in the yeshiva of the religious kibbutz in Ma'ale Gilboa, right by Bet Shean. I'm an officer in the paratroopers. I did my degrees in the Hebrew University. And I worked also, I was the head of staff of Sheli Yechimovic, and I established, also I helped to establish the cooperative bank, OFIC. And I established Lobby 99 4 years ago. That's an NGO grassroots that tries to fight against the 215 lobby of the big firms, of the big companies like the banks and the insurance firms. So I established Lobby 99 that works to promote the interests of the 99% of the public. So that's the main stuff I did in the last, let's say, 10 years.
Okay, now, as the listeners to this show and the readers of the Jerusalem Post know, we do our best to promote whatever can come close to being representatives of English speakers from around the world and in Israel. In the Knesset last night, Yesh Atid chose a list in which the highest placed Anglo representative is number 18 on the list, which does not bode very well. The Likud had Anglo candidates to choose from and rejected them. You are a citizen of the United States. Explain your connections to the Anglo community.
My parents were born and raised in the United States. My father is from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and my mom is from Brooklyn. And they made Aliyah in 68. Also, my sister and my brother were born in the States. So I was born and raised in Jerusalem, but my connection to the United States is pretty tight. And also my big brother Yoel is a professor in MIT these days. So I'm an Israeli citizen and an American citizen, and I'm proud in both of them.
And what will you do as a representative of those people?
I think that the Anglo community is a very important community in Israel, and also a very big community, and most of the messages in the political environment and area are not enough, let's say, connected, and are not, I'm not sure, like, we don't put the message as right as we're supposed to do it to the American community. So I think that's the first thing to know. There are hundreds of thousands here that we need to talk to them and speak to them also in English, and also to the stuff that bother them. And I think also one other goal is to tie the connection with Jews all over the world, and particularly in the United States. I think one of the big problems of the right government we have in Israel in the last 4 years is that they're taking Jews far away from Israel. They're breaking the net and the connection that we're supposed to have with all the Jews, also if they're secular or reformed or conservative. And I want to make that a bridge, to build that bridge once again. between the state of Israel and the Jews in the diaspora.
And that will certainly be a challenge. Now, you also wear a kippa, and while there's Revital Suede, who is also religious and has been in the Knesset for the last 4 years and was just reelected to a realistic slot on the labor list. There has not been a kippa in the labor list or on the left at all since Avram Borg. How would you handle matters of religion and state differently as a member of Knesset?
So I love the Jewish, also the Jews and also the Judaism, and I love the Israel and our state. But I think that people that love also the Judaism and also the state need to promote separation between the religion and the state. I think the connection between them bad also for the state and also for the religion. So that's the first thing. My goal and my motto is more Judaism and less
coercion.
Less coercion, because I think that coercion is one of the main obstacles that take people far away from the Judaism. So let's say I think that when I go to shul on Friday night, there's no reason that people cannot have public transportation on Shabbat. Maybe not as usual as a regular day, but I think that's a thing that could also get people even closer to the Judaism, because there's a lot of good stuff and peace and love and stuff that people don't know about Jewish tradition. And I think that more Judaism and less coercion, that's my main, let's say, motto or main goal that I want to promote as a member of the Knesset.
And you do that in your house as well?
Yeah, as well. I'm a religious Orthodox, and my wife is somewhere between secular and, let's say, Masorti. And so we do it as well also in our private house.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, their different candidates gave out different things on election day to persuade people to vote for them. Nachman Shai gave out pens, which apparently was not a very effective way of getting people to vote for him. Revital Suede gave out M&Ms with her face on it, which was better. Meirav Michaeli gave out fortune cookies, and inside there were fortunes of what would happen if she would be reelected. My fortune that I got said that I would have another child, and she would get me paternity leave, which freaked out my wife, who I don't think we're going to be having another child, though I do recommend paternity leave, and the paternity leave I took with my last child was the best days of my life. But Yaya gave out kippot with the words "Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha" on it. Love your neighbor as yourself, which was a very special, unique thing to do that I guess must have made an impression on people. And it was not expected to see in the Labor Party primary out of all parties. And that leads to the question, Yaya, why the Labor Party? Why should listeners that are eligible to vote here cast ballots for Labor?
And I think that in the politics our days also here and also all over the world, people are trying to take the ideology out of the politics, just to bring people that look good or that could be in reality. But in the Labor Party, we still have ideology. And if you're a person that comes and goes to vote for ideology, so I think the Labor Party has three main flags. The first flag is trying to separate from the Palestinians to get here a Jewish and a democracy state with a lot of Jews, but also a lot of democracy, and there's no other option than the two-state solution. That's our first flag. The second flag is economic issues. We want to, let's say, mind the gap between rich and rich and poor people, and not be one of the highest rank all over the world in gaps between rich and poor people. And the third thing, as we spoke before, is the religion and state issues. We believe in more Judaism and less coercion. So that's, I think, the main three flags of the Labor Party. And other parties, they're not exactly, you don't know, maybe except of the Likud and Meretz, but in the center, there are a lot of parties that you're not sure exactly who they are, what they're for, and each thing that they write or say to the press afterwards, they give 3 or 4 press releases that they're not exactly what they said, and they want to explain themselves. So the Labor Party, you know the way, and that's, I think, the main reason to vote for the Labor Party if you're in the center left of the Israeli map.
Could you just elaborate on the issue of the people living in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank? You have neighbors, you have friends, you have relatives living there. You're in favor of evacuating them? Of how many? Of keeping blocks, not keeping blocks? Well, what's your point of view on that?
I'm not favor of evacuating them. I don't want to evacuate them, but I think there's not any other option. I don't know another option that could promise Israel keeping and going as a Jewish and a democracy state. So I think the only solution there's the option to do is to make 2 states for 2 people. They're supposed to be there and we're here. And sadly, we will need to evacuate not too many, but part of the settlers that are now over the green line. Exactly how many to where, that's in negotiation, and our goal is to evacuate as less as we can. But there's no other solution than the 2 states.
Okay, my last question is just to point out, again, I think I've done this too much, but on the show last week, when I was talking about what happened behind the scenes in the Labor primary, I did point out again how your mother stood there, 75 years old, outside the polling station for 11 hours telling people, I'm Yaya, Fink's mother, you will vote for him. Did that work? Is that what put you over the top? Did you get all the votes at the Jerusalem polling station?
I had 210 volunteers, but the best volunteer was my mom, and I love my mom, and she was there for 11 hours. We don't know the exactly results by each polling station, but I'm pretty sure that she was my secret weapon.
Absolutely wonderful. Yaya, thank you for coming on Inside Israel today on thelandofisrael.com.
Thank you very much.
We're going to a break. After the break, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have more from behind the scenes in Israeli politics.
For Rosh Chodesh Adar Bet, this coming new moon, we are doing the Land of Israel Network Shabbaton at the Dead Sea, called the Israel-Inspired Retreat, where there's going to be Torah study and connection and meditation and prayer, and we're going to be able to connect and to talk about everything that's going on in Israel today on spiritual levels. It's going to be a really special weekend. You can find out about it on thelandofisrael.travel. That's thelandofisrael.travel. You can see all the details there. We'd love to have you join us.
And we're back here on Inside Israel today on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com, where the election on April 9th is coming closer and closer. This is the big week because on Thursday night at 10 p.m. Israel time is the last moment for candidates to be submitted, for lists of parties and candidates to be submitted to the Central Elections Committee. As we stand here, 61 hours before that deadline, there are already representatives of 2 new parties who are sitting outside the Knesset, have been since last night, sleeping there in the Jerusalem cold, waiting to be the first permitted in to the Knesset with their requests for what it would say on the ballots for their parties. That's how intense it is. And as we speak also, the parties are doing what they were pretending to do over the last 2 months of making the political mergers and bonds necessary to win the election. They always were saying, we're trying, but it will really all come down to the last couple days. Well, we're there, ladies and gentlemen. Now the parties are talking. Whichever parties make bonds will help themselves, and whichever parties end up running on their own could end up under that bitter 3.25% electoral threshold and not make it into the Knesset. We've already seen our first casualty of the threshold, Tzipi Livni, who has been in the Knesset since 1999, will not be in the next Knesset because there was no party that wanted to merge with her Hatanua party. She was unceremoniously kicked out of the Labor Party that ran together with her as the Zionist Union in the last election 4 years ago. And then she tried to pitch herself to various parties. They all said no. They didn't want to work with her because of her personality, perhaps because of her politics. And that left her running alone. And running alone, she had only 0.5% in the polls that were announced on Sunday night. 0.5% when you need 3.25%. She was clearly not going to be making that up, and she did not want her votes to be thrown in the garbage. And so I attended yesterday her press conference in Tel Aviv. Now, I came into this press conference a little angry, I got to tell you the truth, because when I got there, they told me she's not taking questions. Okay, I came all the way from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, dropped everything to cover this press conference. I brought along with me another reporter from another Israeli newspaper who also lives in Jerusalem. The first person I saw when I walked into the room was another reporter from another newspaper in Israel who lives in Jerusalem. The three of us made the effort to go there. You could at least let us ask questions. And I knew what would happen, and ended up did happening, which was that at 8 o'clock at night, when we have our highly rated nightly news, Tzipi Livni gave interviews to the anchors of all three television stations. I don't know how she was on all three at the same time. It seems to me physically impossible, but she managed to do it, even though their studios are not close to each other. And they got to ask whatever they wanted. So I came into this press conference a little justifiably angry at her. And then, though, I listened to what she said. And regardless of where you are on the political map, and I know the overwhelming majority of the listeners of this show and of this network are not where Tzipi Livni is on the political map, you had to feel for this woman because she's there crying at her not accomplishing anything that she wanted to accomplish in 20 years in politics. She wanted there to be a two-state solution, which rightly or wrongly she thinks is necessary for Israel to remain a Jewish democratic state for demographic reasons that may or may not be accurate. She wanted to preserve Israeli democracy at a time when Netanyahu is taking steps that, from her opinion, make Israel less democratic. And she's not only not accomplished those things during those 20 years in politics, now she won't have an opportunity to try to accomplish them in the next term, and who knows if she'll be able to make a political comeback. You know, in Israel, you never say never. Ehud Barak is still trying to make a political comeback at the age of 77. When he ran for Labor Party leader when my daughter was a baby inside the Snuggly, when I took her to cover him voting in the Labor branch in Jerusalem, and he comes up to my baby and tells her, "You're going to vote for me when I'm Shimon Peres's age." And he is not yet. It's a good 7 years away still from being the age that Shimon Peres was at the time, and my daughter just had her bat mitzvah. So you can never rule out political comebacks, but the reason why the parties didn't want her was because she had trouble working with other people in the past. She didn't get along with people. She brought in new people every time she switched a party, and then she would abandon them when she would move to a new party. She treated very professional, very successful politicians terribly, and I can understand party leaders not wanting to have her there anymore. So it's pretty unlikely that she will be able to make a political comeback in the future. Maybe she'd become some international figure, maybe in the United Nations or some other international organization. But whether you like Tzipi Livni's politics or not, she worked hard over the last 20 years. And she behaved professionally and respectably during that time, except last night when she gave those interviews after not taking questions at her press conference. But the world has changed, and the media has changed in Israel, and it's in fashion to treat reporters poorly. And we'll see if Netanyahu ends up giving any interviews at all to the mainstream media during this election campaign. So it is what it is. This is what it's like being a reporter inside Israel today. Stay tuned for next week when we will introduce you to another candidate, perhaps the Bayit Yehudi National Union New Right parties that I have not been able to interview anyone from because it's not been clear who their candidates are. They have to tell everyone by Thursday. So hopefully I'll be able to find a representative of those parties now that will know who the candidates will be to interview next week inside Israel Today. Have a great day and a great week from here in Jerusalem. Bye-bye.
The question is, why are the Jews there in the first place? The Jewish people have been yearning to return to their ancient homeland for a long time.
The Yishai Fleischer Show, the voice of a new generation of pro-Israel activists.
And there's only two kinds of minorities in the Middle East, armed or unarmed.
Inspiring minds to think differently.
That jihadism doesn't just attack Jews. It attacks Christians, and it mostly attacks Muslims.
Inspiration, spirituality, and politics.
So first and foremost, this country is here to defend Jewish people and to live in its ancestral homeland.
Listen to the Yishai Fleischer Show every week on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.